when people can see something, they will fight over it. The concept of mimesis, right? If they can see it, they'll fight over it. So they can see Hans Island, they fight over it. They see a border, they fight over it. And you can see, for example, the Franco-German border between France and Germany. The border you can't see is the border between Twitter and Facebook. And what do I mean by that? What is the border between Twitter and Facebook? Well, Twitter has like 330 million users. Facebook has 3.6 billion. And for each person, you could define the border as for their time spent on, so let's say that's 3.6 billion Facebook users, 330 million Twitter users. The total is 3.93 billion max. It might be like 3.7. There might be an overlap there, okay? For each person, you can define a 0 to 100% in terms of the time that they would spend on either their 100% Twitter or 100% Facebook, right? The border region would be those people who are 50-50. And that might be a group of 70 million people in the world who spend exactly 50% of their time. And there's people who are farther from the border who are 30-70, and people who are really far from the border near the capital who are 100-0, and vice versa. Okay? What I'm describing there is literally something that you could compute. It's not an abstract thing. If you had access to all of Twitter's data set and all of Facebook's data set, you could compute this. Here's the thing. Nobody has access to both. So nobody can compute it. Or you can estimate it and so on. But unless, like Twitter and Facebook got acquired, they wouldn't be able to literally find out who was on the border region. They could do sampling and stuff, but there's a cloud that has descended, right? These gigantic networks cannot really see their borders that well. They can see themselves, but they can't see what people are doing outside. They have less control in a sense, right? And less visibility. And so instead, what they fight over are the visible things, like, the use of the network and so on and so forth, but they're going to fight over border regions less. The only way they can fight over a border region is to make their product so attractive that they can pull people from that border region. Now, by the way, lest it be said that these are like trivial things to talk about, Twitter's 330 million people, Facebook's 3.6 billion. Both of those are bigger than France and Germany combined, Mm-hmm. These are enormous, enormous networks. It's like a huge chunk of humanity. And the fact that we cannot see the border region means that the entire geography of like how humans operate is actually changing. You have to kind of remap how you think about geography, because in physical space, for example, two people, they're near each other. There's a physical distance metric and so on. In digital space, it's like a bunch of islands that can snap to. Like I can be near you as I am right now and then snap away and be really far, right? And that applies not just for individuals, but for entire continents. So, for example, in the physical world, Russia is basically always going to be adjacent to Japan and Ukraine and Iran and so on. Like Russia, the country, doesn't move around that much. I mean, its borders can expand and contract. With the Soviet Union, it's bigger. When it's the Russian Federation, it's smaller. But it's not like it's suddenly adjacent to Argentina, right? It's not suddenly adjacent to Mexico. It could, like it was involved in the Cuban Missile Crisis at the height of its power, but it's not like projecting power all over the world. By contrast, somebody like, Vitalik of Ethereum, his network of people, right? Or, the Solana network, suddenly this network can be adjacent to another network. Solana can start taking users from Ethereum. It's like this huge island of like 30 million people just surfaced out of the ocean next to Japan and started like pulling people from them.
Gojira. Yes,
right?
Godzilla. Anyway.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's like Atlantis is real, digital Atlantis, this huge island. What the heck, right? And it can then disappear and vanish. And you can also vanish, Yeah. Your thing can kind of be like, hey, we want to cut off those network relations and we want to move our island somewhere else, right? So the thing is that I'm downloading one of about, I don't know how many, 10, 15 different things that turn constants into variables. One of them is the nation that we take for granted, the single group of people, is breaking up into multiple nations that are defined by networks. Another is the currency is breaking up, okay? A third is the geography is changing. A fourth is the moral principles that underpin society are changing. And so when like all of those things are in flux, you kind of need something to catch it on the other side, because otherwise what people will do is they will sort of try to assert that old thing that just doesn't exist anymore. And that'll be like something that does not acknowledge the reality of the situation. It's like opening the, closing the barn door and then expecting to get all the horses back inside when there were forces that were more powerful than that thing that spread them all out, that those entropic forces. You have to kind of go to where those horses are and loop them up and maybe have new ranches or whatever there to extend the metaphor.